they filmed numerous coral-encrusted chariot parts, such as these two chariot wheels still attached to an axle, one wheel flat on the ground and the other in the air. This is a 6-spoked wheel. They found a vast amount of artifacts which loudly attest to the miracle which occurred here. Horse and human skeletal remains are still preserved by the coral, as are chariot cabs without wheels, wheels without cabs, some wheels on axles, and some not. He retrieved a chariot wheel hub, which he presented to Nassif Mohammed Hassan, who was the director of antiquities in Cairo, Egypt. But the most astounding find was this gold-veneered 4-spoke chariot wheel, which he was able to video in March of 1988, but he was unable to retrieve it as the wood had disintegrated, leaving only a thin gold shell. There were many factors which led Ron to this site, but 3 were most compelling. First, in order for the Israelites to have left Egypt proper, they would have had to have begun their journey to the Red Sea on the eastern side of the Gulf of Suez. This left only the Gulf of Aqaba. Second, there is only one place along the shoreline of the Gulf of Aqaba which could hold the perhaps 3 million people. This area is so large it can be seen from this satellite photo. And finally, when Ron studied the bathymetric maps of the British Admiralty in London, he saw a perfect underwater pathway led across the Gulf at this point. On either side of this line across the Gulf of Aqaba, the waters were 5,000 feet deep, dropping off like a deep gorge. But here, at this precise spot, was an area leading across which gently sloped at a 6-degree angle to a depth of only 900 to 1,000 feet in the center. As Ron and the boys journeyed across the Sinai to this site, they noticed large boulders pushed over to the sides of the wadis or canyons, allowing caravans and travelers to pass through. But as they dove into the Gulf, about 1.5 miles out and 200 feet deep, they were thrilled to see this same stone-cleared pathway continued and was still evident in the crystal-clear waters. With the overwhelming evidence of the chariot parts scattered across the Gulf, Ron knew that Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabia. Studying maps, he saw that Jebel el-Lawz fit the biblical description of this holy mountain. Unable to get a visa to enter Saudi Arabia, Ron and his 2 sons finally decided to enter without one. He had learned that the normal procedure if someone were caught without a visa there was to escort the visitor to the border and see that they did not re-enter. They found Mount Sinai with the altar and much more still intact in this uninhabited area, but as they were leaving, they were abruptly arrested and imprisoned for 78 days, accused of being Israeli spies. When they were finally released, they were told that a man had contacted the Saudi embassy and reported the Wyatts to be Israeli spies pretending to be archaeologists. This man had been a trusted friend who had worked with Ron on Noah's Ark.
Ronald Wyatt and his sons are with us in the studios of our Nashville affiliate WTVF to tell us all about it. Gentlemen, good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Wyatt, you there in the middle, and
Yes.
your sons on either side. Why did you, I didn't know that Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabian territory. Why did you think it was?
We found some chariot parts that looked like the chariots found in King Tut's tomb in the Gulf of Aqaba, west of this Jebel el-Lawz. We found these at depths from 60 feet out to 200 feet and over a stretch of about 1.5 miles. And we believe that that was the crossing site. And so in the biblical narrative, they arrived at Mount Sinai after crossing the Red Sea. The language in the Bible indicates that they stayed in a mountain, enclosed in a mountain. So an aerial map showed that this Jebel El Lawz had a large valley enclosed in the rim of an ancient volcano. There's about 5,000 acres in there. We felt this was the place. And in Exodus 24:4 and in Leviticus 6:28, 11:33, and 15:12, it tells of some artifacts that were to be found. There was to be 12 pillars of stone and an altar and some pottery. And so this is why we looked at that particular mountain.
From the beach in Egypt on the Gulf of Aqaba, we have gazed across the water with anguish for many years, knowing that Moses led the great multitude across the Red Sea at this exact spot. Ron Wyatt knew in 1978 that Mount Sinai lay beyond that distant shore. Mount Sinai, where the law was written by God's own finger. Finally, we can see this majestic mountain where God's own presence once rested. Jebel El Lawz in northwest Saudi Arabia. In Galatians 4:25, the Apostle Paul tells us, "For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia." Exodus 19:18, "And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire." Could this blackened peak be the result of the consuming fire of God's own presence resting upon it? In 1 Kings 19, verses 8 and 9, we read how Elijah came to Horeb and went into a cave. Here we see a very large cave just below the solitary tree which is between two massive granite boulders. As we view the holy precinct, the area at the foot of the mountain, we can see a large fence and a guard house, which was erected immediately after Ron Wyatt showed this site to a Saudi archaeologist in 1985. This fence follows along the line of 18-foot diameter boundary markers which Moses was directed to erect by God. This sign by the guardhouse states that this is an archaeological site passed by royal decree, and that it is unlawful to trespass, subject to penalty. And as we pan to the left, here we can see where the fence ends on the other side. And now, as we pan away from the holy precinct, we look out into the area of the camp of the Israelites. There are several archaeological remains still here, but this one is of particular interest for us. In Exodus chapter 32, we read of the golden calf and how Aaron fashions it. And in verse 5, "And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord.'" There is little doubt that these are the remains of that very altar which Aaron built to the golden calf. When the Saudi archaeologist from Riyadh University, who went there with Ron in 1985, saw this, He was very excited.